Lisa Martinez pulled into the driveway of her new home and turned off the car engine. She sat there for a moment, looking at the small 3-bedroom house with its neat front yard and white picket fence. After 3 years of working double shifts at the hospital and saving every penny she could, she had finally done it. She owned a home in Willowbrook Estates, one of the nicest neighborhoods in Phoenix. Her 8-year-old son, Jake, pressed his face against the car window. "Mom, is this really our house?" he asked with excitement in his voice. His 6-year-old sister, Emma, bounced in her car seat, trying to get a better look at their new home. "Yes, sweetie," Lisa said with a smile. "This is our home." She had worked so hard for this moment. As a single mother and a nurse, money was always tight, but she wanted to give her children the best life possible. Willowbrook Estates seemed perfect. The houses were beautiful, the streets were clean, and there was even a small playground where the kids could play safely. The family spent their first week unpacking boxes and getting settled. Their neighbors seemed friendly enough. Mrs. Johnson, from next door, brought over a welcome cake. Mr. Peterson across the street waved hello every morning when Lisa left for work. The children loved their new bedrooms and had already made friends with some kids who lived down the street. Everything seemed wonderful until the second week. Jake had been playing outside with his new friends after school. They rode their bikes up and down the quiet street, laughing and having fun. When it started getting dark, Jake rode his bike up to the front yard and left it on the grass near the porch. He was tired and hungry, and Lisa was calling him inside for dinner. The next morning, Lisa found a bright orange notice stuck to her front door. She pulled it off and read it carefully. The paper had big letters at the top that said, "Violation." Notice, in red ink. Below that, it explained that leaving personal property on the front lawn was against the Homeowners Association rules. The notice said she had to pay a $200 fine within 10 days. Lisa felt confused and upset. It was just a bicycle left on the grass for one night. She had never lived in a neighborhood with a homeowners association before. She thought the rules would be reasonable things like keeping the grass cut and not painting your house bright purple. A $200 fine for a bike seemed very harsh. She decided to pay the fine anyway. She did not want any trouble in her new neighborhood. Lisa worked hard for her money, and $200 was a lot for her family. But she wanted to follow the rules and be a good neighbor. 2 weeks later, Emma was playing outside with chalk. She drew flowers and rainbows on the driveway, just like she used to do at their old apartment. The colorful drawings made Emma smile, and Lisa thought they looked cheerful and innocent. But the next morning, there was another orange notice on the door. This time, the violation was for unauthorized markings on community property. The driveway was considered part of the community, and chalk drawings were not allowed. Another $200 fine. Lisa felt angry this time. These were normal things that children do. She had seen other kids in the neighborhood doing the same activities. She called the Homeowners Association office and spoke to a woman named Dorothy Walsh. Dorothy's voice was cold and unfriendly. She told Lisa that rules were rules, and everyone had to follow them equally. There were no exceptions for children or new residents. Dorothy suggested that Lisa read the Homeowners Association handbook more carefully. That weekend, Lisa sat down and read every page of the thick handbook she had received when she bought the house. The rules seemed to go on forever. There were rules about what color curtains you could have, where you could park your car, what kind of flowers you could plant, and even what time you could put your trash cans out. Many of the rules seemed designed to make normal family life very difficult. The third violation came a week later. Jake had made a small garden gnome in his art class at school. He was very proud of it and wanted to display it by the mailbox. Lisa thought it was cute and harmless, but apparently all decorations had to be approved by the Homeowners Association first. The gnome was considered an unauthorized decorative item. Another fine, this time for $250. Lisa began to notice that other people in the neighborhood had decorations and did things that seemed to break the same rules. Mr. Peterson had a small American flag in his flower bed. The family 3 houses down had wine chimes hanging from their porch. But only Lisa seemed to be getting violation notices. She decided to attend the next homeowners association meeting to understand what was happening. The meeting was held in the community center on a Thursday evening. Lisa had to ask her neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, to watch Jake and Emma because she could not afford a babysitter. When Lisa walked into the meeting room, she saw about 20 people sitting in folding chairs. At the front of the room sat 4 people at a long table. A man with gray hair and an expensive suit introduced himself as Richard Kane, the Homeowners Association president. Next to him sat Dorothy Walsh, the woman Lisa had spoken to on the phone. The other 2 board members were Kevin Brooks and Stephanie Clark. Richard Kane ran the meeting like he was the king of the neighborhood. He spoke in a loud voice and seemed to enjoy having power over people. When homeowners asked questions or complained about fines, he would cut them off and tell them that the rules were not up for discussion. Lisa noticed something strange during the meeting. Most of the people getting violation notices seemed to be single mothers like herself. Mrs. Garcia, who lived alone with her teenage daughter, had received 5 violations in 2 months. Ms. Rodriguez, a widow with 2 young boys, had been fined for her children's toys being visible in the front yard. When the meeting ended, Lisa approached Richard Kane to introduce herself and ask about her violations. He looked at her with cold eyes and a fake smile. He told her that new residents often had trouble adjusting to community standards. He suggested that she might be happier in a different neighborhood if she could not follow simple rules. Lisa felt a chill run down her spine. There was something threatening in his voice, even though his words seemed polite on the surface. She realized that this was not about following rules. This was about power and control. She was being targeted, but she did not yet understand why. As Lisa walked back to her car that night, she made a decision. She would not be pushed around or forced out of her home. She had worked too hard to give her children a good life. If Richard Kane and his board wanted a fight, she would give them one. But Lisa had no idea how far they were willing to go to get rid of her. The harassment from the Homeowners Association got worse after Lisa attended the meeting. Richard Kane seemed to take her presence as a personal challenge. Within a week, she received 2 more violation notices. One was for having curtains that were supposedly the wrong shade of white. Lisa looked at her curtains and compared them to her neighbors. They looked exactly the same to her, but the notice claimed hers were off-white instead of pure white. The second violation was even more ridiculous. Her car was parked in her own driveway, but the notice said it was positioned incorrectly. According to the Homeowners Association, her car was 3 inches too far to the left. Lisa measured the distance herself and could not see any difference between her parking and her neighbor's parking. Each violation came with a fine of $250. Lisa was now facing over $1,500 in fines for things that seemed completely normal. As a nurse working at the local hospital, she made decent money, but these fines were putting a real strain on her budget. She had to skip buying new school clothes for Jake and Emma to pay the Homeowners Association. The situation got even more stressful when Lisa had to work extra shifts at the hospital. The nursing staff was short, and Lisa needed the overtime pay to cover the mounting fines. This meant she had to miss the next Homeowners Association meeting. She called the office to explain that she was working and could not attend. Dorothy Walsh's voice was icy when she took the call. Missing a meeting is a serious violation of community standards, she told Lisa. All homeowners are required to participate in community governance. Lisa tried to explain that she was working to save people's lives at the hospital, but Dorothy hung up on her. The next day, Lisa found Richard Kane standing in her front yard with a clipboard and camera. He was taking pictures of her house and writing notes. When Lisa asked what he was doing, he smiled that same cold smile from the meeting. Just conducting a routine inspection, he said. We need to make sure all community standards are being maintained. He took a picture of a small scuff mark on her mailbox and wrote something on his clipboard. This will need to be addressed immediately. Kane began showing up at Lisa's house almost every day. Sometimes he came alone, sometimes with one of the other board members. They would walk around her property, looking for any tiny flaw they could find. They measured the height of her grass with a ruler. They took pictures of leaves that had fallen from the tree in her yard. They even complained that her welcome mat was positioned 2 inches too far to the left. Lisa started keeping a journal of all their visits and taking her own pictures as evidence. She realized they were not inspecting other houses in the neighborhood with the same intensity. She was being singled out and harassed. The breaking point came when Lisa's mother, Carol, came to visit. Carol was 72 years old and had trouble walking after a hip replacement surgery. She used a walker to get around safely. Lisa was grateful for her mother's help with Jake and Emma, especially when she had to work late shifts at the hospital. Carol enjoyed sitting on the front porch in the evening, watching the children play in the yard. Sometimes she would leave her walker on the porch when she went inside to make dinner or help with homework. It was easier than carrying it up and down the steps every time. One evening, Richard Kane knocked on Lisa's door. He was holding another violation notice and looked very pleased with himself. "This is a serious violation," he announced loudly. "Medical equipment cannot be displayed in public view. It violates our community aesthetic standards." Lisa stared at him in shock. "It's my mother's walker," she said. "She needs it to walk safely." "I don't care what it's used for," Kane replied. "The Homeowners Association bylaws clearly state that all personal items must be stored out of public sight. This creates an unsightly appearance that brings down property values." Carol came to the door to see what was happening. When she heard Kane's complaint, she looked hurt and embarrassed. "I'm sorry, Lisa," she said quietly. "I didn't know I was causing trouble." Lisa felt her anger boiling over. "This is my mother," she told Kane. "She's not causing any trouble. She's helping me take care of my children." Kane's smile got wider. "The rules apply to everyone equally. If your mother cannot follow community standards, perhaps she should not visit so often." He handed Lisa the violation notice. This fine was for $400. That night, Lisa decided she had enough. She spent hours on her computer, researching the Homeowners Association bylaws and state laws about housing discrimination. She discovered that many of the things Kane and his board were doing seemed to violate proper procedures. The bylaws required certain voting processes for rule changes, but she could not find any record of votes for many of the rules they were enforcing. Lisa also started reaching out to other homeowners who had received violations. She learned that Mrs. Garcia had been fined over $3,000 in 6 months. Ms. Rodriguez was facing foreclosure because she could not pay her fines. Another single mother, Jenny Davis, had already sold her house and moved away because of the harassment. All of the targeted homeowners had something in common. They were single mothers trying to raise children on their own. The families with 2 parents seemed to have fewer problems with the Homeowners Association. Lisa began to suspect this was not a coincidence. She decided to run for the Homeowners Association board herself. If she could get elected, she could work to change the unfair rules and stop the harassment. Lisa printed flyers explaining her platform of reasonable rules and fair enforcement. She wanted to make Willowbrook Estates a place where families could actually live and be happy. When Richard Kane heard about Lisa's campaign, his attitude changed from annoying to threatening. He called her at home one evening after the children were in bed. "You're making a big mistake," he told her. "This community has standards. If you can't live up to them, maybe you should find somewhere else to live." "Is that a threat?" Lisa asked. "It's friendly advice," Kane replied. "Some people just don't fit in certain neighborhoods. It would be better for everyone if you realized that sooner rather than later." After Kane hung up, Lisa felt scared for the first time. There was something in his voice that made her worry about her children's safety. She double-checked all the locks on her doors and windows that night. Lisa did not know that Kane and his board members were meeting in secret, planning their next move. They had already driven away 3 other single mothers from the neighborhood, and they were not going to let Lisa stop their operation. They were preparing to take actions that would change Lisa's life forever. Lisa woke up on Tuesday morning feeling hopeful for the first time in weeks. She had been campaigning for the Homeowners Association board, and several neighbors had promised to vote for her. Mrs. Johnson from next door had even offered to help, pass out flyers. Lisa believed that if she could get elected, she could stop the harassment and make the neighborhood a better place for families. She was getting Jake and Emma ready for school when she heard a knock at the front door. Through the window, she could see two people in business clothes standing on her porch. Behind them stood Richard Kane and Dorothy Walsh, both looking very serious. Lisa opened the door and found herself face to face with two social workers from Child Protective Services. The woman introduced herself as Ms. Peterson and the man said his name was Mr. Garcia. They both showed Lisa their official badges. "We need to talk to you about your children," Ms. Peterson said in a professional voice. "We've received some concerning reports about their welfare." Lisa felt her heart drop into her stomach. "What kind of reports?" she asked, her voice shaking. Mr. Garcia pulled out a folder filled with papers. "We have multiple reports that you're leaving your children unsupervised for long periods. There are also concerns about the condition of your home and whether the children are being properly fed and cared for." Lisa stared at them in shock. None of what they were saying was true. She never left Jake and Emma alone. When she worked late shifts at the hospital, her mother Carol stayed with them, or Mrs. Johnson watched them. Her house was clean and well maintained. Her children were healthy and happy. "This is completely false," Lisa said. "Who made these reports?" Ms. Peterson looked uncomfortable. "The reports came from concerned community members who wished to remain anonymous. We're required to investigate all reports of potential child neglect." Richard Kane stepped forward with that familiar cold smile. "We're just looking out for the children's best interests," he said. "The community has standards and children deserve to live in a safe, stable environment." Lisa realized what was happening. Kane and his board had made false reports to Child Protective Services to get revenge for her campaign against them. This was their way of stopping her from fighting back. "You can't just take my children based on lies," Lisa said, trying to stay calm. "I'm a good mother. I work at the hospital, saving people's lives. My children are well cared for." But the social workers had already made up their minds. They had seen official-looking documents that Kane had prepared. There were photos of Lisa's house taken during his daily inspections, with circles drawn around tiny flaws like the scuff mark on her mailbox and leaves in her yard. The photos were labeled as evidence of poor home maintenance. There were also statements from anonymous neighbors claiming they had seen the children playing outside without supervision. Lisa knew these statements were lies, but the social workers treated them as facts. Jake and Emma came to the living room to see what was happening. They could tell something was wrong by the look on their mother's face and the presence of strangers in their home. "Mom, what's going on?" Jake asked, moving closer to Lisa. Emma started to cry when she saw her mother's tears. "I want them to go away," she said, pointing at the social workers. Ms. Peterson knelt down to talk to the children. "We're here to help," she said gently. "We need you to come with us for a little while so we can make sure you're safe." "I don't want to go anywhere," Emma said, grabbing onto Lisa's leg. "I want to stay with Mommy." Jake stood protectively in front of his little sister. "We're not going anywhere without our mom," he said firmly. Lisa felt like her world was falling apart. "Please," she begged the social workers. "Call my supervisor at the hospital, talk to my neighbors. These people are lying to you because I'm running against them for the Homeowners Association board." But Mr. Garcia was already calling for backup. Within minutes, 2 police officers arrived to help remove the children. Lisa watched in horror as her babies were taken away from her, crying and calling for their mother. "When can I see them?" Lisa asked through her tears. "You'll need to complete parenting classes and have your home inspected multiple times," Ms. Peterson explained. "The children will be placed with a temporary foster family until we can determine if it's safe for them to return home." After everyone left, Lisa collapsed on her living room floor and sobbed. Her house felt empty and cold without Jake and Emma's voices and laughter. She called in sick to work because she could not stop crying long enough to function. Lisa immediately called a lawyer named Nathan Pierce, who had been recommended by a friend. When she explained what had happened, Nathan sounded very concerned. "This doesn't make sense," he told her. "Child Protective Services usually tries to work with families first. Taking children away immediately is reserved for cases of serious abuse or immediate danger. Something is very wrong here." Nathan started asking Lisa detailed questions about Richard Kane and the Homeowners Association. When Lisa told him about the harassment, the excessive fines, and Kane's threats, Nathan became even more suspicious. "I think you're being targeted," Nathan said. "This sounds like a coordinated attack designed to force you out of your home. We need to investigate this immediately." While Nathan began his investigation, Lisa started her own research. She discovered that Gary White, the man who was now caring for her children, was Richard Kane's brother-in-law. This was not a coincidence. Kane had arranged for his own family member to be the foster parent for Jake and Emma. Lisa drove by Gary White's house and saw her children playing in the backyard. They looked sad and confused. When Emma saw Lisa's car, she ran to the fence calling for her mother. Gary White quickly brought the children inside and closed the curtains. Lisa felt sick to her stomach. Her children were just 2 miles away, but she was not allowed to see them or hold them. They did not understand why they had been taken away from their mother and their home. That night, Lisa could not sleep. She walked through her empty house looking at Jake's drawings on the refrigerator and Emma's stuffed animals on her bed. She had worked so hard to give her children a good life, and now they were gone because of Richard Kane's lies and greed. But Lisa was not giving up. She was going to fight with everything she had to get her children back and make sure Kane and his board paid for what they had done. She did not know yet how deep the conspiracy went or how many laws Kane had broken, but she was about to find out. Nathan Pierce worked day and night to help Lisa get her children back. The lawyer had handled many difficult cases, but something about Lisa's situation made him very angry. He could tell that she was a good mother who was being attacked by people who had too much power and not enough conscience. Nathan started by requesting all the documents from Child Protective Services. When he read through the reports that had been filed against Lisa, he immediately noticed problems. The complaints were very detailed, but they all sounded like they came from the same person. The writing style was similar, and many of the claims were about things that only someone watching Lisa's house very closely would notice. "These reports are fake," Nathan told Lisa during one of their meetings. "Whoever wrote them was trying too hard to sound like different people, but they made mistakes." Nathan also discovered that all the anonymous reports had been called in within a 2-week period, right after Lisa announced she was running for the Homeowners Association board. This was not a coincidence. The lawyer decided to dig deeper into Richard Kane's background. What he found shocked him. Kane owned a real estate company called Phoenix Property Solutions. Over the past 3 years, his company had bought 6 houses in Willowbrook Estates, all at prices much lower than the market value. Nathan looked at the addresses of these houses and cross-referenced them with Homeowners Association violation records. Every single house had belonged to a single mother who had been heavily fined by the HOA. The pattern was always the same: months of harassment, huge fines, and eventually the mother would sell her house cheap just to escape the neighborhood. "This is a criminal conspiracy," Nathan explained to Lisa. "Kane has been using the Homeowners Association to target single mothers, make their lives miserable, and force them to sell their homes to his company at low prices. Then he resells the houses for full market value and makes huge profits." Lisa felt sick when she heard this. "So he's been destroying families just to make money?" "That's exactly what he's been doing," Nathan said. "And when you decided to fight back by running for the board, he had to find a way to stop you. Taking your children was his nuclear option." Nathan hired a private investigator named Mike Torres to help gather evidence. Mike was a former police detective who specialized in fraud cases. He began following Kane and the other board members, taking pictures and recording their activities. Mike discovered that Dorothy Walsh had been using her connections from her old job as a school administrator to make the false reports to Child Protective Services seem more believable. She knew which social workers to call and what words to use to make them take immediate action. Kevin Brooks had been forging documents to support the fake violations against Lisa and other targeted homeowners. He had created fake inspection reports and false neighbor complaints. Some of the violations Lisa had received were for rules that did not even exist in the official Homeowners Association bylaws. Stephanie Clark had been stealing money from the Homeowners Association budget to pay for the conspiracy. She had used HOA funds to pay for fake inspectors, legal fees, and even bribes to people who helped with the scheme. The most disturbing discovery came when Mike Torres found Gary White, the foster parent caring for Jake and Emma. Mike watched Gary's house for several days and noticed something very wrong. Gary was recording conversations with the children, trying to get them to say bad things about their mother. Mike was able to get close enough to hear some of these conversations through an open window. Gary would ask Jake and Emma questions like, "Did your mommy ever leave you alone?" And, "Were you scared when you lived with your mommy?" When the children said no and defended their mother, Gary would get frustrated and keep asking the same questions in different ways. "He's trying to coach them to lie about you," Mike told Lisa. "He wants them to make statements that would support the fake case against you." But Gary's plan backfired. Jake and Emma consistently defended their mother and begged to go home. These recordings, which Gary thought would help the case against Lisa, actually proved that the children were happy and well cared for before they were taken away. Mike Torres also discovered that Kane had been embezzling money from the Homeowners Association for years. Kane had created fake companies and sent them payments for services that were never performed. He had stolen over $50,000 from the community fund that was supposed to pay for things like landscaping and playground maintenance. Nathan Pierce took all this evidence to the FBI. Federal agents were very interested in the case because it involved civil rights violations, fraud, and conspiracy across state lines. Kane's real estate company had been buying and selling properties in multiple states using the same illegal methods. The FBI assigned Agent Sarah Wilson to lead the investigation. Agent Wilson had experience with organized crime cases, and she could see that Kane's operation was like a small criminal organization. The Homeowners Association board members each had specific roles in the conspiracy, and they had been working together for years to steal money and destroy families. Agent Wilson got court orders to tap Kane's phone and search his computer. What they found was even worse than Nathan had suspected. Kane had detailed records of his targets and how much money he expected to make from each house. He had spreadsheets calculating profits from forcing families to sell their homes below market value. The most damning evidence came from recorded phone calls between Kane and the other board members. In one call, Kane said, "These single mothers are easy targets. They don't have husbands to help them fight back, and they'll do anything to protect their kids." In another call, Dorothy Walsh said, "The Child Protective Services route works great. Once we take their kids, they'll sell their houses for whatever we offer just to get out of town." The FBI also found text messages where the board members joked about the families they had destroyed. Kevin Brooks had written, "Another one bites the dust after Mrs. Garcia sold her house and moved away with her daughter." Agent Wilson showed Lisa some of these recordings and messages. Lisa cried when she heard how casually these people talked about ruining her life and taking her children, but she also felt hopeful for the first time in weeks. "We have enough evidence to arrest all of them," Agent Wilson told Lisa. "This is going to be a very big case. They're going to prison for a long time." Nathan Pierce was already preparing to get Jake and Emma back. With all the evidence showing that the reports against Lisa were fake, Child Protective Services would have to return the children immediately. But first, the FBI was going to make arrests. Agent Wilson wanted to catch all the conspirators before any of them could destroy evidence or run away. The takedown was planned for the next morning, and Lisa would finally get justice for what had been done to her family. At 6 o'clock in the morning, FBI agents surrounded Richard Kane's house. Agent Sarah Wilson knocked on the front door while other agents covered the back exits. Kane answered the door in his pajamas, looking confused and angry. "Richard Kane, you are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, embezzlement, kidnapping, and civil rights violations," Agent Wilson announced as she put handcuffs on him. Kane's face went white when he heard the charges, especially the word kidnapping. "This is ridiculous," Kane protested. "I run a homeowners association, not a criminal organization." "Tell that to the judge," Agent Wilson replied as she led him to the police car. At the same time, other FBI teams were arresting Dorothy Walsh, Kevin Brooks, and Stephanie Clark at their homes. Dorothy tried to run out her back door but was caught by agents waiting in her yard. Kevin attempted to delete files from his computer, but the FBI had already seized all his electronic devices. Stephanie broke down crying and immediately asked for a lawyer. Gary White was arrested at his house while Jake and Emma were eating breakfast. The children watched in confusion as the man who had been taking care of them was led away in handcuffs. A kind social worker named Ms. Rodriguez arrived to explain what was happening. "You're going home to your mommy today," Ms. Rodriguez told the children. Jake and Emma started crying with happiness and relief. Lisa was waiting at the Child Protective Services office when Jake and Emma arrived. She had not seen her children for 6 long weeks, and they looked thinner and sadder than when they were taken from her. But when they saw their mother, their faces lit up with joy. "Mommy!" Emma screamed as she ran into Lisa's arms. Jake hugged her so tightly that Lisa could barely breathe. All 3 of them cried tears of happiness as they held each other. "I'm so sorry this happened to you," Ms. Rodriguez said to Lisa. "We were deceived by false reports. This should never have happened to your family." Lisa took her children home that same day. The house felt warm and happy again with Jake and Emma's voices filling the rooms. That evening, they had a celebration, dinner with Lisa's mother, Carol, who had flown back to Phoenix as soon as she heard the good news. The criminal trial began 8 months later. The courtroom was packed with reporters and community members who had followed the case. Lisa sat in the front row with Nathan Pierce, watching as the people who had destroyed her family faced justice. The prosecutor, District Attorney James Martinez, presented overwhelming evidence against Kane and his co-conspirators. He showed the jury recorded phone calls where the defendants joked about destroying families. He displayed financial records proving they had stolen money from the homeowners association. He played recordings of Gary White trying to coach Jake and Emma to lie about their mother. These defendants didn't just break rules, District Attorney Martinez told the jury. They broke up families, stole children from their mothers, and committed serious crimes for money. They showed no mercy to their victims, and they deserve none from this court. Kane's lawyer tried to argue that his client was just enforcing homeowners association rules, but the evidence was too strong. The jury could see that Kane had been running a criminal operation designed to steal homes and destroy lives. Dorothy Walsh's lawyer claimed she was just following Kane's orders, but the recorded conversations showed she was an eager participant who enjoyed hurting families. Kevin Brooks tried to blame everything on the others, but his forged documents proved his guilt. Stephanie Clark's lawyer attempted to get sympathy by saying she was scared of Kane, but the financial records showed she had stolen thousands of dollars for her own benefit. The trial lasted 3 months. Lisa testified about the harassment her family had endured and the pain of having her children taken away. Jake and Emma, now old enough to understand what had happened, also testified about their time in foster care and how much they missed their mother. Other victims of Kane's scheme also testified. Mrs. Garcia told the court how she had been forced to sell her house and move to a different state to escape the harassment. Ms. Rodriguez described losing her home to foreclosure because she could not pay the excessive fines. Jenny Davis explained how the stress of fighting the homeowners association had made her sick and cost her job. When the jury came back with their verdict, Kane and his accomplices were found guilty on all charges. The judge was clearly angry when she delivered the sentences. "You preyed on single mothers and children," Judge Patricia Adams told Kane. "You used your positions of trust to commit serious crimes. You showed no remorse for the families you destroyed." She sentenced Kane to 12 years in federal prison. Dorothy Walsh received 8 years for her role in making false reports to Child Protective Services. Kevin Brooks got 6 years for document fraud and conspiracy. Stephanie Clark also received 6 years for embezzlement and conspiracy. Gary White was sentenced to 4 years for child endangerment and conspiracy, and he was banned from ever being a foster parent again. Lisa filed a civil lawsuit against all the defendants and won $2.8 million in damages. She used part of the money to pay for therapy for Jake and Emma, who needed help dealing with the trauma of being separated from their mother. She also moved her family to a new home in a different state where they could start fresh. But Lisa did not just disappear quietly. She became an advocate for homeowners association reform, working with state lawmakers to pass new laws protecting families from the kind of abuse she had suffered. She gave speeches at conferences and wrote articles about her experience, helping other families who faced similar problems. The Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association was disbanded, and placed under state supervision for 5 years. Kane's real estate company went bankrupt, and all the houses he had fraudulently acquired were sold. The money from these sales went to compensate his victims. 3 years later, Lisa received a letter from Mrs. Garcia, who had moved back to Phoenix after Kane was imprisoned. "Thank you for fighting back," the letter said. "Because of your courage, our children can grow up safely in their own homes." Lisa kept that letter in a frame on her desk. It reminded her that sometimes one person's willingness to fight injustice can protect many other families. Jake and Emma grew up proud of their mother's strength and determination. They learned that standing up to bullies, even powerful ones, was always the right thing to do. Kane and his accomplices remained in prison, their criminal organization destroyed forever. The families they had hurt were finally safe and justice had been served.